This is a piece of beautiful 1960s furniture, but more than that, it's a radio. I believe this is referred to as a console in the US. Here in Poland it's called a radiola. This one is an Unitra DGS-302 and it has a record player as well. And under the other lid there's a used Q-tip. But more importantly, there's a power outlet and a 5-pin DIN input, so you can extend this with, for example, a tape recorder. It also has a lit compartment underneath. I assume this is for storing records. The record player is fully automatic. It can change records if you have 12 or 7-inch records. It can play 78, 45, 33 and even 16 RPM records. But of course there are several things to fix, both with the furniture itself and with the electronics. And if you followed my repair of the OSE Oscar, you know that I'm highly likely to just mess things up instead of repairing them, so this will be exciting. Less exciting is the fact that this leg wobbles. It looks like the screw has eaten through the threads in the wood. It's not attached properly. And another problem is that the cheap fiber board this is built of has cracked, so that the lid to the record player has come loose. The record player doesn't work. It seems the mechanism has gummed up, and that's a common problem with BSR record players. It's the grease they used that gets sticky and turns into glue with age. And the radio needs an overhaul. Not only are both the potentiometers and the switches crackly, even with the volume turned to 0, the radio will crackle and pop. That's an indication that they are bad capacitors that needs replacing. I will do this in several parts because otherwise the video becomes too long. The first part I will deal with the furniture, and in future parts I will deal with the record player and radio. So first we have to deal with this cracked backside. I will try to get rid of as much glue as possible with a hot air gun, and then I will glue this backside together with wood glue and will screw on the lid again. To not damage or heat up the record player unnecessarily, I will first remove it. It needs to get out to be repaired anyway. Access to the record player is from behind this panel, which is just loosely held on with screws. It probably was better held on by screws before, but the corners have been destroyed. Behind the panel we find an output transformer and a speaker, and we'll now have to stick our heads in and pretend that we're car mechanics. And when we stick our head in and look up, we see two of these weird flip thingies. I don't know what they're called, but they hold the record player in place. But if you flip them up like this, you can then lift out the record player. There's also a few cables that hold the record player in place. One of them are the power cables that are attached to one of these distributor thingies. You just need to unscrew them from there. And the audio connector, it's behind this panel, as is the radio. That panel is held on with these kind of hook screws. You just unscrew them and unhook them. And then you can remove this by lifting it up. It sits in a slot on the underside. And there we see the radio. The red cable comes from the tape compartment that I showed earlier, and the white cable is the one that comes from the record player. So we unhook it, and you also need to unscrew these little clamps to get it free. And then you can lift out the record player. Low light, crappy camera that makes everything look grey and grainy. It really looks like the 60s. Well, the record player is out anyway. And let's remove the radio too. It also needs repairs anyway. These screws that are screwed in from the underside, that's what you need to take away first. That means the chassis is now loose, but you still can't remove the radio. One thing you need to do is to unscrew this little power switch and other switches, because that's actually soldered into the radio. It also is connected with two connectors, and I first tried to just unplug them before I realized that the power cable is actually soldered in. So an option is to remove those two connectors and unsolder the power cable. But I chose to take all of it out as one. You also need to get rid of this little extension thing for the antenna leads. It's in the way, you won't be able to remove the radio otherwise. It should sit with two screws, but in this case it sits with only one. And those screws are accessed from the compartment under the radio. That makes it hard to reach and get these screws out, and it's gonna make it even harder to get it in. It's a two-man operation to screw this back. Just a little warning for later. And this is where you need the soldering iron, because the radio is soldered into the output transformers. Somebody has desoldered this already and very helpfully left numbering on the leads. If you don't have that, you will need to do that. Desoldering this is not particularly interesting, so I'm not going to show that. I will instead show you the speakers. No, you're not blind. The brand is called Tonsil. I don't know why. They still exist and apparently make high quality speakers. Okay, you get a bit of desoldering then. Come on, you know you like it. After that, you can finally slide the radio out of the furniture. So now I finally get to fix this furniture. And while I go at this glue with the hot air gun, let me tell you about a little funny coincidence that happened just after I had bought this radio. I was up in the mountain with my wife and we were looking around to find something to visit, and we found that the local town museum in a small town called Świdnica had 5 stars on Google. Could really a small town like that have a city museum that was that good? We decided to give it a try. And the museum is really lovely. It has a nice collection of arts and history from the town. But it also had a surprise. In the basement there was a radio just like mine. It turns out that Diora was based in Świdnica, just 1 hour from where we live, and in the basement of the city museum they have this lovely collection of Diora radios. But hang on, didn't I say this was called the Unitra? Yes, I did. Time for some history. Diora started out as a furniture factory in 1945, but it soon started making cases for radios. And after that it started making radios under its own Diora brand. After the fall of communism, the company was reorganized as a private company and now mainly makes children's furniture. But it also makes high-end speaker cabinets. Unitra was another factory that also made radios here in Poland, and it seems like sometimes the Diora factory made things under the Unitra brand and probably the other way around. Maybe it was because this one was made for export. Something that is noticeable because all the labels are in English. Even the record player is English. This is a Birmingham sound reproducer. Yes, it's manufactured in the UK. But this radio never left Poland. And after that history lesson, I'm now done removing glue and blowing the dust out from the holes. Then it's a simple matter of clamping the backside and gluing it together. I'm using polyurethane glue. That's because that's harder than normal wood glue and it also expands, so I'm hoping it will fill up better. And after getting as much glue as deep down as possible, we just have to let it dry overnight. And while we're waiting for it to dry, let's fix that wonky leg. I'm just kidding, I'm not that organized. I did this leg like a month later. Since the wood screw had stripped out the wood, I made a bigger hole and then put a plug in it with more wood glue. And when that had dried, I first sawed it off and then shaved off the rest of the wood that was sticking up. I tried using a file first, but that was a bad idea. That just destroyed the leg. And I sand it flat. It needs to have a good connection to the rest of the furniture so it doesn't wobble. And then I just clamp it tight and drill a smaller hole for the wood screw to grab onto. And here is the culprit. This little pad was between the leg and the furniture, and that means the leg isn't firmly attached to the wood of the furniture. Instead, it can wobble slightly when you move the furniture. And that means that the wood screw can start eating into the wood. All the legs had little pads like that, so all the legs needed to be unscrewed and the pad needed to be removed. When it comes to the cracked backside, after the glue had dried, I scraped away the excess glue with a razor blade and sanded it flat. I then used the hinge to mark where the holes were and drilled little pilot holes for the screws. And after that I just screwed in the wood screws. All very basic and simple. The lid also has this little hinge mechanism that needs to be installed that helps to hold it open. And that's it for this part. Next time I will clean the record player and see if I can get that working again. See you then!